Good evening, and welcome back to Paranormal M. Help us work the algorithm by dropping a comment below. We strive to bring you real accounts of paranormal activity on a daily basis, and work towards competing with larger channels through hard work and perseverance, and an adherence to our OPs telling of their story. Respond to stories or leave your own 6 cents on the matter, or drop some love for the bump. A haunted marijuana farm. You may have guessed, but this took place in Colorado. The farm itself was way off the beaten path, which was perfect for growing a crop. People liked to steal, and it made it interesting for the only security guard there at night. It was apparently used to grow beans throughout the 1900s before some bright-eyed entrepreneurs bought it to get a foot in the cannabis business. It's completely surrounded by woods on all sides. Upon entering the complex, you're met with several old farmhouses. Only one was used for offices, while the other 2 were just storage. This was called the admin area, and it's on the north end of the property. To the east, west, and south, you have 3 growing fields, all approximately 100 acres. Just past the admin area, you have several greenhouses encompassed by a fence and a large garage attached to it. And that was used to be a greenhouse, but now holds supplies. Across the lot from that, another garage for farm equipment. So a very large area for one lone security guard. Now this was a brand new contract, so I had no one to show me around, and I was basically tasked with creating security procedures for the other guards to follow. To that end, I was working 7 days a week, 4 p.m. to 6 a.m., until I had everything ironed out. My first day, I do a walk through the place with my boss and the farm owner that is then left, pretty much leaving me on my own rather to figure it out. Thankfully, I did have a decent little office in the admin building, and they even had an 8-channel security system set up. So weeks go by, nothing weird has happened. Not even an off feeling. If anything, it was beyond peaceful. I figured out a good security routine and made a policy out of it for the new guards to follow. After that, life was easy. Do my checks, read Fanatic, watch YouTube, glance at cameras, repeat. I was doing just that at about 2 a.m. when I see a black mass jump over the greenhouse fence. I bolt up, lock my office, and run down there, weapon drawn. Now that may seem like a dramatic response, but I should be the only person for literally miles around. The main road is the only way by vehicle, and it's gated. Plus, the gate is right next to my office, so I would have heard or seen someone approach by vehicle. The foot traffic at that hour and in that location, well, it's probably not the mailman. I get to the greenhouse area gate and quietly let myself in. I start checking greenhouses one by one. After about 20 minutes, I find absolutely nothing. I find the camera in question and looked around the area but found nothing out of place. I end up doing my entire security check early just to be sure, and then head back to the office. I plan to review the footage because the fence is 8 feet tall with an additional foot of barbed wire across the top. That in itself freaks me out because I've been outside for over an hour before I realize the only thing that can clear that jump is a mountain lion. So I hustled back to my office. But my monitor is black. No signal found. The hard drive in the brand new DVR is fried. At this point, it's weird, but not necessarily paranormal. A few days go by. We get the hard drive replaced. All is well. It's probably around midnight, and I'm doing my checks by the backside of the greenhouse area, when out of nowhere, a blood-curdling scream, and it's damn close. My body goes cold. This very well could be the big cat I suspected from a few nights earlier. I find the nearest gate and let myself into the greenhouse area. Better in there than out in the open. But then I hear crying, unmistakably female, diaphragm shaking, snot slinging, weeping. That's not a cat. I almost wish it was, but I have to look. It's my job. Now behind the greenhouse area, there's a dirt road in front of the center field that circles all the way around it. This road connects to the perimeter road for the 2 side fields. Think of 3 big circles arranged in a loose shape of a triangle with the greenhouses in the middle. Well, this crying sounded like it was coming from that center road. I start to approach very slowly, and I can still hear it as clear as day. It's getting louder and louder the closer I get. It's almost nightmarish, until it just stops. So I stopped. I stayed there completely still for quite a long time. But there was nothing. People don't just stop sobbing. There's at least a sniffling, maybe that hiccup when you try to catch your breath. But it just went from wailing to nothing in one beat. After that, I always felt uncomfortable toward that back field. I heard the scream several more times after that, always around midnight, and always from that same area, but never went to investigate after my initial experience. By this time, harvesting has come. It's come and it's gone, and the fields are bare. I'm still needed, however, because they used the greenhouses throughout the winter, and as the seasons changed, so did my responsibilities. Rather than patrolling the fields, my focus was the greenhouses. Not just for theft, but also ensuring that the heaters continued to work throughout the cold nights. To this end, I took to parking my Jeep next to the greenhouse area so I didn't have to make a long trek through the snow from the security office to the greenhouses. I could see everything I needed from my driver's seat, and my Jeep heater was infinitely better than the little space heater in my office. I had a routine: start the Jeep, get it nice and hot, then turn it off. I kept my windows cracked because security work at night is 50% listening for weird shit. I didn't have to listen hard. A loud bang immediately removed any drowsiness I may have had. Something just hit my vehicle. I don't get out immediately. I took a good look around, listening for footsteps and checking my mirrors frantically, but there's nothing. Then it happens again, bang, on the roof of my Jeep, and dirt tumbles down my windshield. Someone's throwing dirt clumps at me? I call my supervisor and explain what's going on. She says she's on her way and she'll be there in about a half an hour. She's working at another farm not too far away. I reached to the passenger seat and grabbed my spotlight. The big kind of spotlight, 1,000 lumens, allowed me to see the back of every field. The kinds of spotlights that'll land you in jail if you shine it at a plane. I hop out of my Jeep and climb onto the roof. It had to have come from the back field. I began panning back and forth with my handheld beam of daylight. I don't immediately see anybody, so I start with the verbal commands. Come out! You're trespassing! Announce yourself! I'm authorized to use lethal force! Yada yada. No response. I stay posted up until my supervisor arrives. We decided to walk the perimeter of all 3 fields and found absolutely nothing. By this time, it's almost 3 a.m. and we're back at my Jeep talking and smoking. Then a whistle. Like that playful 2-tone whistle that says, I'm over here. My supervisor just gave me this look like, seriously? I told her that's the kind of thing I deal with at this place. She stuck around for the rest of the shift, but nothing else happened. It stayed quiet until Christmas Day, when I picked up a shift for that sweet holiday pay. I also opted to stay in the office for the sake of my Jeep. That's when the music started. Long, flowing classical music that you might hear playing quietly at a fancy party. I listened, then stood up and listened some more. Walked to the doorway of the security office and stopped to listen again. It's still there. I stepped out and it stops. I pause to dead silence. I step back into my office and I can hear it again. I poke my head out and it stops. I lean back in and it starts again. It was almost cartoonish. It went on for quite a while and gradually faded away. There's nothing in that old building that plays music, no radio, PA systems, and no one had forgotten a cell phone. Wasn't my phone, as I had actually tried to record it, but picked up nothing but white noise. I walked outside in the off chance that it was coming from miles away, but yet again nothing, and I only ever heard that music on Christmas Day. After that, I'd actually gotten permission to bring my husky to work, and he loved the farm, especially in the snow. But some nights he wouldn't leave my side. He would actually growl at things I had no perception of. Which is strange if you own a husky. The strangest thing about that place was that you could tell if it was going to be a normal night or not when you got there. Some days the atmosphere was just different. A lot of other things happened there, but those were the big ones. If I get decent response on here, I may share a few more stories from my time in the Marines, or during my time as a cop. I implore you to do so, sir. Cops chasing shadows in the old courthouse. I was at a loss with what to do with my life after getting out of the Marines. I took quite a bit of time off from being a responsible adult in an attempt to decompress from 6 years of intense structure. Shortly thereafter, I realized I couldn't function properly without that structure. Just like that, Facebook targeted me with a life advertisement. Like it had read my thoughts. My small town city police department is looking for a full-time patrol officer. Makes sense. It's the closest I'll ever get to the fulfillment of serving one's country, serving my community instead. Being a cop would give me the structure and order I needed. I could even help people on a more personal level, more than I ever felt I did as a Marine. It just made sense, so that's what I did. Interviews, background checks, drug tests in the academy, and then I was in. Sort of. I may have been a sergeant of Marines, but a few medals to display in an oak shadow box, but now I'm just a rookie. As such, I have to ride with the field training officer. I may have graduated the academy, but that's only the basics. Boot camp, so to speak. Now I'm partnered to a veteran cop with 15+ years on the force. Officer, I'll call him D for privacy, was easily respected. Firm but fair. By the book, and seemed to know everything about anything. I couldn't have found a better training officer. He recognized that I had, what it was exactly that I'd done in life up until that point and respected me for it. Treated me like an adult. I couldn't ask for more, so the months went by. We responded to car accidents, domestic calls, disputes of all kinds, and even a few funny, in my opinion, calls. Like a lady hitting her husband over the head with a ladle because he said her chili was bad. A story for another time, perhaps. So, we worked the night shift. Less chaotic for a new guy, I suppose. Part of our duties was checking up on the local government buildings throughout the night. I may have mentioned it was a smaller town, but we had recently had a new courthouse and jail built. The old courthouse was repurposed into a lot of smaller offices, DMV, water board, county clerk, registrar of property deeds. The attached old jail was for the most part simply abandoned. The old jail is connected to the old courthouse by a 3rd-story sky bridge. I guess the idea was if you were sentenced to jail time, you could march right into that jail. It was a quiet night, and on one particular shift, Officer D suggests that we should knock out our nightly checks before things inevitably get not so quiet. It's about midnight, so we cruise over to the old courthouse to get started. We pull right up to the main entrance, and I get out and approach the doors like I'd done for months already. Just a quick tug to make sure it's secure, but the door swings open. From the cruiser, I hear the straight-laced Officer D simply state, "Fuck." My eloquent response is, "Why fuck?" See, the courthouse, old or new, is the sheriff's department's domain. When it's found unlocked in the middle of the night, it means getting the sheriff out of bed. So that's what we did, and Sheriff J did not disappoint. This man showed up wearing pajama pants and a gun. He called a few sheriff's deputies in the area to assist because we now have to go into this large 3-story building and search the entire thing to ensure nobody's wandered in. Eerie does not even begin to describe it. You know what I mean if you've ever been inside of a mall or a school well beyond after hours. A place normally bustling with activity being so still and so quiet is disconcerting. But nevertheless, we had a job to do. So myself, Officer D, 2 sheriff's deputies, and our pajama-clad sheriff began to sweep the first floor of the building. One thing I did notice is that the place had those motion-activated hallway lights that click on one by one as you progress further in. Other than that little observation, it was routine. On the second floor, more offices. Some I knew, some I didn't. No sign of anyone or anything out of place. We've more or less split up at this point to cover more ground a little quicker. It's clear that Sheriff J would like to go back to sleep. I turned a corner and I met with a long, dark hallway. No office doors in sight, just a single door at the end, with a sign identifying it as a stairwell. On the right side of the hall were many large windows overlooking the parking lot. I began the trek to the stairwell, glancing out the windows down at our cruisers, then up to the 3rd floor. I met with the same hallway as the floor below, windows now on my left as I moved towards the main hall. This is where all the old courtrooms are. Going into the first courtroom, I was met with a once majestic and dignified room reduced to an oversized and disorganized filing cabinet. Manila folders stacked high as far as the eye could see. It was a hoarder's dream and downright perilous to walk through. I wanted to check out the old sky bridge, but it was sealed up tight. Oh well, I search the room as best as I can and I find nothing. So I stumble out of that life-sized game of bureaucratic Jenga and move on. But it looks like the other guys already finished up the other 2 courtrooms and were waiting for me. We came up empty-handed. Well, that was the best-case scenario. So we head back down to the 1st floor and leave out the main entrance. Sheriff J securing the doors behind us. We congregate by the cruisers and we were swapping stories about what each of us saw. It's not every day that you get to explore an old courthouse at night, after all. The minutes tick by and the building is long since gone dark. The lights turning off with the lack of motion to activate them. Until one did. On the 3rd floor, and another in succession, as if someone was walking the hallway as I just had, not 15 minutes before. 5 law enforcement officers stood stock still watching this happen until the entire hall was illuminated once more. Then, as the last light activated, a dark figure peered around the edge of the window and then leaned back out of sight. A moment of hesitation from everyone present before Sheriff J charged the door, jamming the key in and whipping the door open. The sheriff and his deputies ran to the left staircase while Officer D and I burst into the right stairwell. We rushed to the 3rd floor and both groups stopped at each end of the main hall for a moment. We had just ran down the side hall where this person or thing just was. It was a lot colder than before. I stayed at the L intersection on my side, while the deputy stayed at the L intersection of the opposite end. These are the only 2 staircases in the whole building. No elevators either. So we have this person cornered. Sheriff J, Officer D, and the other deputy then meticulously start clearing the courtrooms again. I stayed at my intersection, constantly looking between the younger deputy across from me and the hallway that had already begun to go dark again. It was a tense 20 minutes. Felt like days. But the 3 senior cops came out of the last courtroom looking baffled. Sheriff J, now looking more than awake, signaled our departure. We once again left the building, locking it behind us. There wasn't much talking like before, but each one of us took one last long look at that hallway before leaving. Business as usual. Let me say one thing. In my 35 years on this earth, I've seen some unusual things. I never went looking for ghosts. I didn't go to bed one night hoping that the thing that came to say hello was going to stand at my window, gurgling an ancient language I could not and did not want to understand. I didn't ask to spend an awful weekend with the possessed girl. I did not want to keep waking up to the sound of hysterical laughter and sobs, running to the door only to wake on the couch 3 more times, each time the entity drawing closer, stuck in a loop that I could not escape. I didn't want 6 months of bad luck brought upon me by an owl. I didn't care to see the large sloth-like creature casually passing through my living room upon waking from a nap. The ghosts at work several times, I didn't want any of it. At first, these things scared me. By the time the event I will discuss today took place, I couldn't give a damn. I had been living in Miami for a few years. I wanted to go back home to the Panhandle to start a band with my uncle. Things down south had downward spiraled enough, and it was time to move on. So I packed my guitars and a few personal belongings and hit the road north in my truck. I moved in with my Mimi and my uncle in Havana, a small town outside of Tallahassee, not far from Greenwood, where my last post took place, not far from my hometown. It was great being with family. My uncle and I started working on new songs. He bought a new computer, microphones, and all this for recording music, and life felt better than it had in a long while. I had put myself through the ringer and was ready to focus on making music and just existing and trying to be healthier. I slept in the room where we recorded our songs. Across the hall was my uncle's room. I woke up one night to discover a dark figure stooped in the doorway. The light from the computer allowed me to see how defined its shape was. I could clearly see the shape of its head, slim and black as night. It just stood there, hunched over. It was tall, most likely 10 feet or so. I knew it had woke me up on its own to try and solicit a reaction from me. It wanted my fear. I'm hip to the grift. Gonna take a lot more than that to get anything out of me. I'm more scared of people than I am of these entities. It waited there, expecting me to give it what it desired, my fear. It was just hungry and looking for sustenance. At this point in my life, I didn't really care. I had come to the conclusion that strange visitors were going to show up from time to time. I had something along the lines of, quote-unquote, "Fuck off, I'm trying to sleep, get out of here." I turned over on my mattress and fell asleep shortly after telling it to leave. The next morning, I woke up and found my uncle sitting on the porch steps in the back deck having a cigarette. I greeted him and lit my own. "Man, I had something weird happen last night," I told him. His expression became solemn. "Let me tell you what happened to me first," he said. He began to explain. He had woke up in the middle of the night to a figure hovering over him. He told me that it felt like it was trying to suck the light out of him, or the life out of him, just through his mouth. He pushed at the air above him and felt resistance, like something was there, but not fully solid. He ran outside and waited a while before he could bring himself to go back inside. My uncle doesn't make things up. He's a straightforward guy. I trust him and I know that he's telling me exactly what happened to him. He had never had something like this happen to him before. When I told him that I saw the dark figure in my room, he looked baffled. We both knew that we were having a visitor that night. My uncle was very much worried about it then, but I assured him that we would be all right. He was worried about it coming back and messing with his mother and my Mimi. Never returned, though. Not that I really care anyway. Business as usual. Owls everywhere. I spent a large portion of my time in the forest, and being from a small town in the mountains with nothing else ever going on, always have. Not to mention it was always an escape from the chaotic home life growing up in the train wreck that was most of my 20s. I would hike up the 20 miles or so some days, being able to just walk down the road to the edge of town and into the woods where sometimes I'd even be out well into the night before returning. A cold spring evening in 2020 was one of those nights which I still think of often. On the particular day, I had hiked farther and into a newer area of the mountain that I'd never been to prior. As it grew dark, I decided to stay out and keep exploring, reaching into my backpack, grabbing my headlamp. Sometime later, slightly after midnight, I'd say I was walking pretty grown to the trail when, up ahead in the middle of the path, my headlight caught a shiny orangish-red glimmer, reflecting back in the light. At first, I didn't think anything of it, as it was probably just glass or something somebody had dropped on the path. But as I approached, I noticed that there was actually 2 orange dots, until stopping probably just 5 feet away, could clearly see it was not glass, but a small brown owl. I froze, not wanting to spook it, but also wondering why it was flying away. It just sat there staring at me, moving its head side to side in that fluent owl motion. Not sure how long this whole exchange lasted, but eventually the owl just turned calmly, then flew away. I continued on deeper down this trail, thinking about how cool and lucky I was to have that rare kind of face-to-face with an owl like that. The wind started to pick up, and I could tell I was getting closer to the side of the mountain. I also started to see flashes of light like orbs, first just in the corner of my peripherals, but then more direct. Red and yellow, then stream by quickly up the trees. I figured it just to be an eye shine again, maybe from another owl, or even the flying squirrels, which are nocturnal and common in my area. That was until, ahead in the darkness and coming towards me, were 2 large yellow orb-shaped lights. These were on my height level and moving side to side in a swaying motion, I remember. Instantly, I interpreted this as flashlights, and that perhaps I'd wandered onto somebody's private property or something. I'll add now to these lights were more of a glow and not a beam projected out like a flashlight. I instinctively just turned and ran, not wanting to deal with any bullshit or get in trouble. I shut off my headlamp once I got down to this other, more defined trail, and I kept on without much problem, as it was just about a full moon and quite bright. I continued on down the hill until my foot clipped a big tree root, sticking up in the path and sent me tumbling. I sat up and looked back to see if I saw any lights following me, and after a minute, flicked back on my headlamp to see where I was at. The trees were now much larger, older growth, with less brush in between them. Then, as I looked up, my heart stopped in disbelief of what I was seeing. The light from my lamp shone into the old trees, revealing owls. Dozens and dozens of owls amongst the branches and in the hollows. Their eyes are reflecting back fiery red at me. Every which way I turned, owls perched on the trees, more silently flying in to join, all looking at me. This is where things get strange. The last thing I clearly remember was just in addition to the insanity and disbelief, a strengthening sense of unease and almost doom, I'd like to say. From that point on, my memory becomes patchy. I just entered this weird, foggy, almost dreamlike state, I vaguely recall walking through the thick rhododendron bushes and climbing on rocks well off any path in the middle of the woods. I was slow and sluggish, without really thinking of processing what I was doing, just like on autopilot. This lasted through the remainder of the night, and as the sky shifted to a slowly brightening dark bluish purple, I kind of snapped back. Not entirely everything felt heavy. I remember, and I decided I just was going to start on my way back, but not thinking anything of the strange things that had just occurred, causing me to lose several hours and the remainder of the night. Walking back, I fell into that mindless, foggy autopilot-like state again. I'd be following the old railroad bed which trenched miles for a good portion of the way back, but would randomly walk off into the woods, through thorns and over trees and other debris. I was walking through one particular spot where a spring divided and cut through, making little islands you'd have to hop onto over the water. At one point I stopped. Looking up ahead higher up on the bank, I see a man standing there facing me. He was dressed in what I can remember looking to be that of an older style, like turn of the century, specifically a long ratty brown overcoat and a larger bowler cap, which also cast a shadow over the face, leaving no details there to be seen. Instantly, the man lunged towards me, sprinting at full speed, but completely unaffected by all the thorns and bushes and huge downed trees and flowing streams between us. It was like they weren't even there. I could also feel the ground shaking and the heavy thump of his feet slamming the ground with force. Still in that fog dream state, I just stood there watching him approach, feeling absolutely nothing. I was completely numb. I didn't care at all. The man then crashed right into me, through me. I didn't flinch or anything, but I also wasn't affected physically by this either. The man literally ran through me and was gone. I continued on the rest of my way home, still absent-minded and still detouring from time to time to waddle through brush and bushes for no apparent reason. Finally, I made it home. It was still morning and the darker out now, but with a light snow falling. I opened my front door through the backpack and slumped onto the couch, exhausted. Then I noticed something strange on the coat rack by the front door. It only took a moment to get the full picture of what it was, and again, it had kind of an emotional effect on me. I believe, rather, what he's writing is, it had no emotional effect on me. Hanging on the coat rack was the man from earlier, although this time it was only a torso and a head. He hung by the back of his overcoat, which was ratty and torn, and his head with two oversized black pits where his eyes would be, and his jaw slacked, dropping heavy to the side, almost like it was disconnected and hanging in place by pale bluish skin. As I stated before, this garnered no reaction from me. I did turn my head away a few times, rubbing my eyes, then looking back where the man still hung. I sat there and then staring at him as he faced me. His absence of eyes made it hard to know if he was staring back. Then slowly I drifted off to sleep in the presence of this corpse hanging across from me, without a care in the world. For a week after all this happened, I saw owls and everything. Spots in the walls would form into owls. The letters on license plates and pictures, TV, wherever I'd see owls, they were forming out of random things or just there in general. I ran to the door. I was 20 years old, living in Auburn, Alabama. I'm 35 now. This took place at an apartment where my friend and bandmate's girlfriend lived. We stayed that night. I woke on the couch one morning to a strange sound. It was coming from the kitchen, which was separated by the living room by a 14-foot hallway. The sound was like a young woman laughing and crying hysterically. It sounded wrong. I was immediately alarmed, and I rose up from the couch and sprang toward the front door to make a quick exit. I turned the doorknob. I woke up on the couch. Again, the sound of laughing and crying was closer now in the hallway. I jumped up, ran to the door, turned the doorknob, and you guessed it, right back on the couch. This time, the sound was directly behind me. I couldn't get up to run towards the door this time. Whatever this was had some sort of hold on me. I did the only thing I could do, which was pull the covers over my head. I stayed there with this thing behind me with its strange laugh and cry, and eventually I woke up on the couch. Everything was normal upon waking up the fourth time. I told my friends about this, and they thought it was strange, but chalked it up to a weird dream. To this day, I swear I was awake. I've had weird dreams, but this wasn't the same. It stood at my window. It was 2007. I was 19 years old, living in an old country home in the town of Greenwood, Florida. Beautiful wood floors, large front porch, a nice back deck. It was built in the late 1800s. One night I was home by myself. My two roommates were out and about in the next town over. I decided to get some sleep. The head of my bed was up against the wall of the room. There was a big window at the head of the bed. My back deck was to the left of me, directly on the other side of the wall. The home is built up off the ground. You could get under the deck as it was open. We used it to store rakes, shovels, and a couple 5-gallon buckets. I first heard it run into the yard from the field, heavy and fast, like hooves on the ground. It ran under the porch, and I heard it knock over one of the buckets. It came straight to my window. It stood at my window. The foot of the window was up off the ground about 4 or 5 feet. It was a tall window, as the house had tall ceilings. This visitor must have been 8 or 9 feet tall. It began making a sound, a low, growling language that was completely unlike anything I'd ever heard. It was not an animal, and it was far from human. It put me in a trance. I couldn't move. I didn't particularly want to move to alert it of my presence. But it knew I was there. Why else had it come to my window but to say hello? It must have seen me before, or could just smell me. I barely even drew a breath. How long I lay there with it speaking through my window, I'm unsure. 10 to 20 minutes is my guess. Its voice was terrible. Exactly what you would expect an evil thing must sound like. Over and over it spoke to me. I'd never felt fear like this in my life, knowing that it stood inches from me, separated only by the old thin pane of glass. It still fills me with dread, but I'm also filled with wonder. It eventually ran off. I heard its departure just as I'd heard its arrival. It was a tall thing and must have some weight to it. The next morning I looked under the back desk. A 5-gallon bucket was on its side and sticking out the deck, knocked over just as I knew it would be. There's nothing but wood for miles behind that house, pasture and woods stretching along the highway till Kingdom Come. Down that highway about 40 miles is my childhood home where I live today. The thing that came to greet me is still out there as far as I know. Wouldn't take long for it to get here. Does it know I'm here? Will it ever visit me again? The thought sends chills down my spine. Finally, making communication. So there have been some paranormal experiences I and my family have experienced in our house. I first noticed it around 2 years ago. I was in the garden and I was home alone. I had this feeling to look up, and in the window I saw a figure. I was stunned, but it's never scared me. They've knocked photos down, rolled objects, and made noises. Whenever something happens, I try and talk. In other words, a room spray bottle was knocked off the shelf upstairs, whilst me and my were downstairs. You guys decide. So I got it, sprayed the room, and said, "Hope that's better. Please don't knock things over." There was no way it fell off, and my mom and I have tried debunking it. Lots of things have happened. If I go through each, I'll be typing for hours, but everyone in my house has experienced something. My mom knocked on the door, and she felt and heard something knock back on the other side. I was there, and we both were kind of like, damn, okay. Guess they are here right now. My sister saw somebody coming up the stairs and thought it was me, since it was just the both of us home, but when she looked, it disappeared in front of her eyes. Whenever something happens, I'm not really scared. I don't feel attacked or uncomfortable. It's just life and death, I guess. I got an auto-scan radio for doing the Estes method, and so far I've got "your mother," in quotes. Then when I asked about what my mother and my children, I got why. My mom thinks there's a possibility that it's my dad who died 9 months ago, but this is all slowly starting around 2 years ago, so I don't really think it's likely. I want to be able to understand why they're here and what their intent is. It's done nothing to harm me that I know of. I don't know if they're going to interfere with my life or if they're just going to continue vibing behind the veils. If there's anything I need to know or a way I might need to protect myself, my family, and my house, please let me know. Also, if more information is needed about experiences, also please let me know about that. Kids playing. This happened when I was 26. I was living with my ex. At the first week I was staying there, I just felt heavy whenever I'm at the house. I always hear footsteps running up and down the stairs, even when I was alone in the house. I told my ex-boyfriend about it, and he never believed me. One night when we were sleeping, I had a dream. I was facing an old mirror, and I'm looking at myself with long hair. I have short hair at that time. And my surroundings were pitch black. The only light that I saw that time was on me, and I can barely see myself in front of the mirror. Then a child's hand came out of nowhere, and it was brushing my hair. I even had a nightmare about running from a girl, and I was running as fast as I could, but whenever I open the door, I keep on running in the same room without any windows on it. My ex-boyfriend never believed in me when one night we were sleeping together and were talking while sleeping, and when I woke up, I started to wake him up as well and asked if he was talking to me while we were sleeping, and he said yes. That's when he started to tell me about his nightmare that he had sitting in the middle of the room upstairs, and a guy with a cloak put a bag on his head, speaking words he can't understand. There are 3 other guys circling him, and the same guy who put the bag on his head started to throw a pile of blood on his head. Everything stopped when the house was blessed. Whenever I see kids on an abandoned house or anything like that, it scares the shit out of me because of that. I'm good with seeing anything else, which I also do, but I don't want to experience being played by a kid anymore. Ghosts and entities. I, a 26-year-old female, used to stay at my friend's, 35-year-old female's house in Alabang, here in the Philippines. Since I'm currently working in a different city from my place, the first time I stayed there, I'm always having headaches and it feels like the energy in the house is heavy. I didn't mind it at first, but things got worse than I expected. I never experienced any of this from any other place. It all started there. I always sleep on the bed with my friend. Then it always feels like somebody is watching me. I always shrugged off that feeling at first. Then I keep on seeing a woman with long hair and a white dress watching me sleep. I always wake up at 3 a.m. and it scares the shit out of me. I ignored it at first, but one time I woke up and she was beside the bed, standing, and when I checked her face, her head is crooked and she was looking at me. I immediately shook my friend to wake her up and she said that no one was there. I keep on seeing her and even had a nightmare about it, so I got used to it. I asked my friend since I keep on getting headaches whenever I walk the hall beside the stairs, and that's when she told me the story of the house. The last owner of the house hung herself on the second floor. I got chills after hearing those stories. I even told her to get rid of the doll facing the stairs that leads to that room. Since I got used to her, I just always try to ignore her when she's there. Then one time I was preparing my coffee at 3 a.m., and if I didn't walk on the hallway beside the stairs to go to the kitchen, I had to go around the dining area with the big mirror in it, like the mirror that you have at a dance studio or a ballet studio. I'm done with my coffee, so I decided to go back to our room. When I was walking back to our room, I was looking outside and I saw a black figure beside the pool with a yellow glowing eye. We were staring at each other for like 15 seconds, because I want to make sure that I'm actually seeing something real, but I was frozen on what I saw. I walked and acted normally. When I went back to the room, I decided to wake up my friend and I was just shaking. So yeah, that's when it all started. So whenever I'm in a different house or a different place, I always choose to go home instead of staying in an unfamiliar place. I'm starting to believe in past lives after this. Has anyone had any similar experiences to mine? So as a preface, I've always been drawn to Europe and 1980s and early 90s since I was young. 80s and early 90s era Eastern Europe in particular has always fascinated me for some odd reason. Ever since I was around 10, I've listened to 80s era pop music from the former USSR, and I felt a connection to it and a bizarre nostalgic feeling from it despite the fact that I'm in my 20s and I grew up in the US. So I'd have no reason to feel any connection to it, and I've been into 80s fashion since I was young, and for some reason it feels way more natural to me than contemporary stuff. Apparently, the way I dress is so accurate to what people typically wore back then that my mother, who's about 60, has told me that when she's seen some of the stuff that I wear, that she remembers seeing people wearing clothing like that when she was younger. Besides that, I'm weirdly able to copy, don't know how to say this word, Cyrillic writing and letters as neatly, if not neater, than I copy English, despite the fact that I never learned or know any other languages besides English. I never thought anything of these facts until recently, since I've always been a skeptic, and I lean towards atheism. But after what happened a couple of weeks ago, I'm really starting to question things. So a couple of weeks ago, I stumbled upon some videos of Riga from the 90s and early 2000s, and everything just felt weirdly familiar despite the fact I'd never seen Riga up to that point. Then in one of the videos I saw an old bridge, and it shocked me, because it looked exactly like the one I saw in my dream I had a year ago. Also in that same dream, I remember driving to an old glass market hall near the water. And weirdly enough, because I was curious, I Googled it and there's a market hall in Riga. And apparently there is, and it reminded me of the one in my dream. And it's also located by the water like in my dream. All of this is honestly kind of creeping me out and making me question if I had a past life or if this is just a bunch of bizarre coincidences. Did my friend's doppelganger just try to kill me? Happened last week, but the situation is still ongoing. I pranked a friend by stealing his phone and returning it the next day. Was all good, some laughs and high fives. The next day, they approached me, asking me to ride with him and go look for his phone, the same phone that I pranked him with. He apparently lost it in a motorcycle crash the night before. He has bruises and wounds on his face, between his eyebrows, nose, bridge, and upper lip. He was very persistent but also polite, but I can feel something different. He can't look straight to my face and he was stuttering, and he just points to the direction where he crashed and lost the phone when I asked him, instead of saying the name of the place. It's a small town where everybody knows everyone and everybody knows the whole place. I asked him where the motorcycle that he used was, and he said it was a friend's motorcycle, and he said it was damaged very badly. Please remember this part about my other friend's motorcycle. And also, by the way, I just kind of laughed it off with my mom. How can one get those frontal bruises from an off-balance motorcycle accident, as he claims? I would imagine like erased dimples and sideburns. You get it. I'm not sure, though. I said I can't go with him. He's still pleading. Then my mom came out and I said I can't. Got some errands to do with my mom. He looked surprised, as if he didn't expect that I was with anybody. He was clearly disappointed and he left. Then I thought it was going to be a quote-unquote normal evening, but the next night I came upon my friend with a clean face, no bruises. The phone was in his hands. I couldn't process it, and I went home still dumbfounded. Then came the bad news. My buddy did get into an accident. Pictures came in from when he got taken to the ER and now the ICU. And he has this frontal wound, forehead, nose bridge, lips and all. He was all right that night. 2 stars written here. About the part with Jay's motorcycle, and why I'm connecting this is because the doppelganger directly said that he crashed. Said that the motorcycle was there and just brushed it off. He was using Jay's motorcycle that night. But when I looked and asked, Jay's bike was sold long ago. I so want my friend to survive just because, but also to confirm that he was with G that night and that the accident was a freak accident. Confusing story. Strange occurrence on the res. While vacationing in Florida back in 2018, I crossed from the west side to the east side of Florida to get to Route 1 to the Keys. I stopped at a gas station on the west to the east road and got gas. A young guy filled me up, about 12 or 13. I asked him if his dad owned the station, and he said, no, the res. I realized that I was on a reservation. I had to pee, so after I gassed up, I parked my car and headed towards the ladies' room. It was on the side. I saw a lady go in, about 10 or 15 feet in front of me. I stood outside and waited. Another lady came up a few minutes later and asked me if there was somebody in there. I said yes. We waited a few minutes more, and the lady said, she's been in there a long time. Are you sure someone's in there? I said, yeah, I saw her go in. I knocked on the door. Nothing happened, so I turned the knob and it was locked. The lady left to go get the key. A lady came out and unlocked the door. I knocked again and nothing happened, so I opened the door. The room was empty and only had a small window high up. I was confused and felt around the walls, wondering if she fell through, like on the Twilight Zone. I washed my hands and left, but the lady didn't say anything and just went in. But you guys, I saw that lady go in that restroom on the res. I saw her. Unexplained happenings from 2022 till today. Last year, I was 4 months postpartum and had a girls' night out, ending up getting a hotel room. Well, we went to sleep, and a couple hours later, I woke up with all the lights. They were all off except the bathroom light. I saw my quote-unquote friend walking to the bathroom, so I just went to turn around, and we were sharing a bed since it was cheaper. I remember thinking, wait, her hair is really long and it's dark, but my friend is super blonde and that hair looked black. Well, I turned all the way and my friend was still sleeping, and I'm about to flip my lid. I grabbed my purse and pepper spray. I think a woman got into our room, so I quietly walked to the bathroom and there's no one. The door's still locked. I checked everywhere, no intruder, nothing. Okay, maybe it was just a fluke. I did have a shot while playing pool, first drink in more than a year at that point, but now for today. I'm putting my son, he'll be 2 in 4 weeks, down for bed, and his toddler bed is pushed up against our bed. And the wall, he's standing, just trying to get to our bed like a kid and he wants to cuddle. I'm holding strong like, nope, gotta sleep like a big boy. But he stops freaking out and looks past me and starts smiling and waving. So our door is behind me, so my first thought is that maybe his dad's came in and just trying to help put him down, hearing him freak. I turn around and 1, I see the door still closed, and 2, something like an adult shadow moved across the wall towards the TV. I'm like, nope, my son's already across the bed and trying to let me hold him while he's now blowing kisses on the other side of the room. I get the hell out of there and I go get my fiance. We're back in the room now while I type this, and my son's now sleeping, but damn, am I crazy? My first and only paranormal encounter. When I was a kid around 8 years old, I lived in a townhouse across the street from a nursing home. The setting of day was night. My parents instructed me to take a shower. The bathroom was upstairs and everyone was downstairs, including my brother, so I was completely alone. I had to face my fears of being alone, so I did what I was told. I'm upstairs now, taking a shower. Everything's normal. Things took a change when I had to gather my clothes from my room down the hall. I stepped out into the hallway and saw what appeared to be a misty, soft glow by my doorway. It appeared to be tall, but I couldn't make out a shape. It was an apparition, something that my eyes had never seen. I was stuck. I couldn't take my eyes off the apparition. It felt like an eternity, but something in my soul told me to run, mostly out of fear of the unknown. I ran downstairs to my parents, distraught and butt naked. I told them that something was upstairs. Naturally, they went to investigate. Long story short, my parents felt like something had just been watching them. But my scare confirmed their suspicions. My aunt ended up coming over to bless the house, but we moved a few months after that incident. I have a scary one. I have a creepy memory that I had between the ages of 14 and 18. In my culture, we call them jinns, and almost everyone has such a memory. I'll write the incident in a way that it's a little bit from myself using a little bit of translation, and I apologize in advance for any parts that are not understood. No worries, dude. If I will return to the subject, at that time I started to experience this along with a lot of problems, such as domestic violence, depression, anxiety, and all that. This made me sink even deeper. I'll try to keep it as short as possible because it'll be a long series of events. There was a dream I used to have all the time, and in my dream I was walking down a street. I came across a small house, and from the outside it looked like it was just a room. Then I entered this house, and the house is huge from the inside, like a really big mansion. When I open the door, a long corridor welcomes me. I start walking nervously. The house looks very gothic and depressing aesthetically. As I walk along, even though I'm scared, I start to hear quiet footsteps behind me, and when I look, I don't see anyone. As I walk, I see a few trinkets, faded flowers, and I ask myself why this house is like this. Someone calls out to me when I turn around. I see that there's no one again. try to go back to the corridor, and I walk down because I'm extremely scared, but I can't find the outer door, and this scares me even more. As I run in a panic, looking for the exit door, a vase tips over and breaks behind me. Something starts chasing me. When I turned around because I want to face it, I don't know how, but it disappears, and when I turn around again, I feel it close enough to grab me by the hair and pull me to the ground. This is the dream in general, and I had the same dream for about 4 years. I was 14 years old when I first started having it, and I had this dream 2 to 3 times a year. But as I got older, I started having it more and more often, and by the time I was 16, I was having dreams every night where something was chasing me until the morning. I didn't feel the need to tell my parents because it was just a dream and it wasn't something I thought they would be interested in at that time. I didn't tell anybody that I saw the reflection of this dream in real life. One night in my dream, 5 people, and I don't know how I know this, but 4 men and 1 woman, they were chasing me, and the woman threw a stone at the back of my leg, and I woke up with that fall. When I wake up, I was wearing shorts and pajamas. When my mother came and just saw what happened at the back of my leg and looked at my leg, realized that the place where the stone hit was blue. Then one day when we were gathering with my friends, when I put the glass in my hand on the kitchen counter in front of everyone's eyes, the glass hit the opposite wall and crumbled right in front of our eyes. I don't even remember how we escaped from the kitchen, but a lot of absurd events like this. I started to feel someone next to me all the time. Someone started to talk to me in my head all the time. But most of the time it was just noise in my head, like when you're sitting in an overcrowded place and people's voices blend together. When I was alone, I was constantly surrounded by things that scared me a lot, like cabinet doors opening, books falling off the shelves, but when I told my family, I don't think they would believe me, and that's exactly what happened. I got an answer like, "You're trying to attract attention." Since the situation was not resolved and there was nothing I could do on my own, I started to live with this invisible friend and decided not to bring up my issue with my family ever again. However, things started to get uglier. I started not sleeping at night out of fear, and if I did, I would always have the same dream. When I went to bed, this thing would lie next to me. Whenever I fell asleep, it would shake me and it would wake me up, and since it wasn't a period when I was mentally healthy, I slowly started having suicidal and similar thoughts. I felt like no one else loved me but him, but at the same time, I was extremely worried that one day I would see him physically, and if I did, I would go crazy. There's so many things I know about him, but I don't even know how I know them. Over the years, I got used to his presence. Suicidal thoughts became too much. I was in a very severe depression, and the medication I was taking were not helping at all. I decided to bring up the subject to my family again. I told my father about the events, and it was a cathartic moment. And I didn't want to die because I couldn't get this thought out of my head. Do something about it. Then they resolved the issue, and I got rid of this friend. I'm now 25 years old, and I have interesting mystical properties. I can read people. My senses are extremely strong. But I shelved this feature a long time ago because I didn't want to get too involved because of what you went through.